Did everyone get that notification that it started recording? Yeah, we're good. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, so this is part of a 4-week program. And before we go into the details, I want to explain a little bit about who Community is and why we're doing this. So my name is Will, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Community. Community itself is a social enterprise as well, actually. So for the past couple of years, we've been working with universities and corporates to help get their staff and students to volunteer. So we help connect people with social enterprises and not-for-profits to use their skills to support their business. So we really believe in the power of volunteering. We know that there's been lots of volunteering done in the corporate sector, that kind of corporate volunteering idea of team building and activities like that. And we think that's great, but what we want to do is encourage more people to volunteer and in more meaningful ways. So over the past couple of years, not just with COVID, but in general as well, Australia's volunteer pool has been dwindling. Less and less people are having those connections to not-for-profits or local community organizations. So what we're trying to do is provide a platform for people to find out about the opportunities that are out there, but also as people are busier, that's a genuine restriction on people's time. So we try to offer various ways to volunteer as well. So part of this program, and we run many programs like this on different topics, whether that's climate action, or understanding or working with people with disability, or social and sustainable procurement. We want to combine, I guess, the education side of things with abilities to get involved. So as part of this program, we'll be running the 2 webinars. So here's a bit of a timeline for the next few weeks. As we're here today on July 7th, supporting Indigenous enterprises. And on July 21st, we'll be working with social traders to understand a bit more about social procurement. But a really key part of this program is that throughout the 4 weeks, you'll actually get a chance to connect with and work with a social enterprise that aligns with your values and I guess the time that you're looking to put in at the moment. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to attend these webinars and work with these organizations. But we really value the ability to combine learning something and doing something. So as part of this program, you learn about social procurement, you're connected with and learn about a specific social enterprise, and you're also able to volunteer your time and skills to support enterprises. So this might look like something that you're familiar with in volunteering. We do have a couple of opportunities where you could go out to a site to help renovate a site for the day, or move stuff around to help them repaint their facilities, something like that you might be familiar with or have volunteered like that in the past. There's also chances to mentor small enterprises who are still trying to find their feet, or looking for some support in how they do their marketing better, or how they do their sales strategy better, and other ways that you can use your skills to support those organizations. So we'll be supporting you through that. We'll be in touch over the next week or so to help you get involved with those organizations and find out more about how you can help. But we're really excited to work with you over the next 4 weeks. And for today, I'd like to introduce Colin Gordon from Worthwhile Ventures. Hey, Colin, do you want to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for giving your time today to have this chat. Firstly, I'd like to pay respects to our elders. They've fought very hard to give me a chance to be in this spot today. So hopefully I can give you some tidbits in this space to hopefully you can go and spend your money wisely with the right people. But I work for an organisation called Worthwhile Ventures. We assist Aboriginal people in business. It's been around for a little while, since 2016. Probably only started kicking some goals late last year when a private donor gave us some money to do 20 businesses each year over the next 3 years. It's heavily built around people donating their time pro bono, successful people such as yourselves, to assist our businesses in either a long-term business coach or utilising your skills in sales, marketing, IT, legal, accounts, to provide short bursts of troubleshooting for the businesses. So yeah, out of that, we hope to get the businesses up to a sustainable level, or if they're going all right, kick them on to a larger level. And look, those steps would be built largely around the Aboriginal procurement space. And so yeah, I think that's why I'm here to have a chat today. But yeah, so our businesses are quite wide in industries. So I don't know. Are we going to ask that a little later, Willem, or do I?
Yeah, maybe now's a great time, Colin. Do you want to tell us a bit about why Worthwhile Ventures exists and why it's needed?
Yeah, well, look, our businesses, there's lots of startups, there's lots of places where people get a start and then they fall down. We don't have a large business community to call on, like most wider community that's been in family members or friends have been in business for a long time. Just to give you a little context, my grandmother was one of the stolen generation, so she was never going to be able to have a business. My father was an activist for a long time, but look, when he started out, he was paid in tobacco and had to fought hard to become get wages. So the chances of him having it was my generation. I'm a sprightly 52. I was probably one of the very forefronts of people in business. I think you'd be familiar with Supply Nation. We were built around, I was one of the 10 founding members of that. So I've been in this space for a little time. But yeah, by not having that business network of people to guide us, we're hoping our pro bono people can provide that service. And that's why the model they finished on and moved forward with. And of course, so many of our businesses require so many different areas. One might need accounts, one might need marketing. To have someone give generic advice in all those areas doesn't help a lot. So we try to use the expertise of people such as yourselves.
That's great, Colin. Can you tell us a bit about the enterprises that you work with?
Yeah, look, they vary across different levels of businesses. We got some that are struggling and probably will failing when they come to us, some that are sort of holding their own up and down between failing and kicking on, and a couple of really good ones that could actually develop in this worth of a venture capitalist scenario. But they're very small percentage, and we have a couple of social enterprises. Look, they're built across a wide range of things: IT, clothing, kangaroo jerky. There's a few education, hairdressers, glamping, kombucha. They're just some of them that I can think of off the top of my head. So, and I'm surprised at some of the areas are in IT being a big one. I didn't realise how many Aboriginal people were in the IT space. So I didn't think there was any, to be honest, when I was very surprised that so many of them are in that space. We have a couple of social enterprises. One does a lot of food deliveries up in the far north Queensland. I think they've delivered about 400,000 meals over the time, not in the period they've been with us, but since they've been formed, because there's no food out in those areas. It's not one of a lot of people in Australia know of how scarce some of the food is up in our more remote communities. Another young fella, he's a bit of well-known DJ. He tries to change kids' lives by getting them into music and using that as a tool to grab them and then hopefully keep them in school or turn their lives around. So very, very wide ranging. That's why we need a lot of pro bono people too, because different industries require different skill sets.
Yeah, for sure. And can you tell us a bit about the challenges of identifying these organizations? Or when we talked the other day, you mentioned a bit about black cladding and the issues that you face as you try to work with indigenous organizations. Can you talk us through some of those challenges?
Yes, look, there's always challenges in this space. It's been around for a little while now. Supply Nation or AMC back in the day has been 15 years roughly. I'm not quite sure. You can check that. But look, the problems have been pretty much the same since the start. Black cladding is, and I don't know if people are familiar with it, you use an Aboriginal face and have another business behind it, and they utilise that to get, and it's usually a very large setup company, and they use that to get corporate or government contracts, and it pays a heavy price for our people because they're of a standard beyond some of our smaller fair income Aboriginal businesses. So they generally get the contract and it squashes our businesses. And it's those ma and pa ones that generally employ Aboriginal people, the more disadvantaged Aboriginal people, whether it's their nephew, their son, daughter, or whatever like that are struggling. When they got a successful business, they generally bring them into the fold. And that's where the big generational change comes. And blackcladding is does very serious damage. And that's what we've been trying to get out of. But it's very difficult because the setup at the moment allows them to get through. And people like yourselves probably struggle to weed those out.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe on that note, what are some things that are important for us to know about working with businesses like these? So I remember when we talked, you mentioned that something like 10 organizations get about 80% of the funding for Indigenous organizations. And that's one of the reasons, actually, if one of your enterprises had to supply 10 offices across Australia with pencils, for example, they wouldn't be able to do that. They don't even have the resources to do that. So it's these really large companies that are getting all of the funding for these type of projects. So can you tell us a bit about, what do we need to know about working with businesses like these and how we can work to support, I guess, true Indigenous enterprises?
Yeah, well, look, it's built around the blackcladding or the large Aboriginal businesses. Look, I addressed Treasury a few months ago now, and I was told out of the might have been $140 million that the government had spent with Aboriginal businesses. 10 businesses got 80 million. So it's not, the money isn't filtering to Aboriginal businesses. And there's a couple of reasons why. Look, those larger businesses are more closer to what you're normally dealing with. I use a ma and pa operations, all right? So there's always been that gap between how does a small Aboriginal business get to a corporate? And that's been a problem since the start. That's hence where blackcladding come in, and a couple of really successful businesses are able to go kick right on, whereas the smaller businesses struggle. And I was one of those. I've had my own businesses up till recently. And so I got to a medium-sized business, about 100 people there. So when I still struggled, right? The corporates have a way of doing things, and they're used to a standard of business. So they've got to drop down their expectations, and our Aboriginal businesses have got to come up a little to make sure they're of a standard that if given a contract, they're capable of doing it, and that's staffing, equipment, cash flow, and all those things. That's what we try to provide so they can make an opportunity there. But yeah, it's very hard for people like yourselves. Sorry, how many people work in Medline, did you say, Willem?
It's about, I think overall we're about 300. Is that right, Karen, Jody? Yeah.
Yeah, well,
that's nationally.
Yeah,
290 permanent, and we have a flexible number of casuals takes us up to around 350, 390.
Yeah, so it's a pretty good sized business. Like some of ours in the larger, you Fortune 500 companies, they have a system. They're used to dealing almost with this is the job we've got. Come and get it. Put your tender in. Right, tender writing's another big one for our smaller businesses. Extraordinarily difficult. And look, some of the tenders I've read are 50 pages. Right, you don't have the time, the energy. Right, so I always used to fight, and I got a few goals kicked with my own businesses. You give a very small slice of the pie, all right? You wing that down to a $20,000 or $50,000 contract, and then where the business can go and do it, and they use those as stepping stones to get the larger businesses. Without that, you'll only ever be able to assist the larger businesses, and they'll keep going and become big conglomerates, and our smaller businesses will eventually start fading away.
Yeah, Colin. So you started touching on, I guess, the processes that we need to do to engage these businesses might need to be simplified, like with the tender process. Even if you're writing a 50-page tender for 10 grand, it's not, is that even worth it? So how do we make those processes easier, and how do we actually support these organizations? Can you talk us through maybe the procurement processes and what are some practical ways for supporting organizations like this?
the biggest ones, I just touched on one, have defined amounts of contracts, whether it's facilities management or you want to procure some goods from Aboriginal businesses, clothes, see a safety vest up in the corner, those sorts of things. Have a defined amount of money and what you want. Don't make the Aboriginal businesses keep coming back and forth. You know, I used to go for a meeting, get the photos taken, go home, have another meeting. You'd have 5-10 meetings for a $5,000-10,000 bit of work, and you'd end up saying, look, buddy, don't worry about it, right? So have those things ready, right? So you can almost present to a business in whatever field you're looking at. This is what we want. This is how much we've got, right? Can you do it? And then have them say, put their case forward, make it a very old school, wind everything back many years to where we want a small business down the road to work for you. So how do you do it? Don't want big tenders. You know, people always say, oh, can we put out a heap of tenders? No one applied for them. Right? A small business hasn't got a designated person, which normally probably people like yourselves will be used to dealing with, right? So it's quarantining a certain amount of work. I don't know if that's the right word, but you put a bit aside of a larger contract for a smaller business. I utilise my own self, Woolworths, when I first had my security company, they wanted to engage my business to do all the Woolworths in Australia. And I said, well, buddy, I'm not up to that standard. So what we had settled on was 1 or 2 areas, very high population Aboriginal areas, and a couple of warehouses. They quarantined that work and that helped me build my business. I had some dealings with Uniting. They had grounds and gardens. Now, an Aboriginal business can't do all the grounds and gardens in Australia, right? But they quarantined 1 or 2 of their big ones. A couple of Aboriginal people tendered for it, and even that was a long process. That few fell out because it was too in depth. But yeah, if you're going to do it, make sure you have very set quarantined areas that you almost targeting people to come into. And I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with your industry. If you're buying some sort of gear off you, say, look, we're going to quarantine this much for Aboriginal businesses. Let's go and target the businesses in that area, and don't make them jump through hoops too long because they just won't do it or won't have the capacity to do it.
Thanks, Colin. And I really like the Woolworths story that you mentioned, because one of the things Colin and I talk about regularly was the difference between, I guess, choosing a supplier and then also actually investing in small enterprises. So one of the things that Woolworths faces, it would be much easier for them to find one contractor to provide security for all of their sites. It would be to do that one-off would be much easier. But by choosing to invest and take the extra step to choose a few warehouses or a few sites to have and invest in Indigenous business meant that that extra bit of work actually allowed for extra staff to come on board to Colin's organisation at the time and actually invest in that business. Colin, just looking at some of our notes here. Yeah, can you tell us, I guess we see why that's important, but can you go through a bit more of the, I guess, the benefits to a small organization with a contract like that and the difference that makes to organizations like that?
Yeah, well, we've noticed we deal with, again, I use the Murray example where, you know, they might be turning out 50, 100,000, a contract from someone like yourselves for 20, 50, or, you know, $100,000. That's an extra staff member. And generally in Aboriginal businesses, we employ our own. I'll use I think it's about 70%, and I can speak from the hard deck, say I've had 100 blokes in a labour hire security business, and about 70% of them were struggle streeters in my warehouse, pretty much straight out of jail, hardly could read and write, some homeless lads trying to get over the. So we do employ those very disadvantaged people in our businesses, and those small contracts might not be much in your turnover, but to that business, 1 or 2 things makes it a lot stable and gets its longevity assured a little more. And 2, it provides a chance for employment, and it's generally the family members or someone in their community, because it's an entry level position most of the times. stashing in boxes or to sell off the products. So it gives someone a chance to do a job that they probably wouldn't have got before.
Thanks, Colin. And you mentioned even, I guess, even with yourself, kind of that generational change. Have you noticed any stories about, I guess, generational change in working in businesses like that and working with the people that you were able to bring on?
Yeah, well, I probably took on too many struggles and it stressed me a little, but look, some of those lads, they went on to help. They were very good in the fields of youth work, right? They went to work, once they turned themselves around, they were able to go to the local, might have been Marist Youth Care or something, I can't remember the names of them, and they'd work with the children to help them turn their lives around. So I saw that little step, and of course they were not much older and had been through the troubles. The children respected them and took a lot on what they said. So others moved into working in the Commonwealth Bank, buying a car, paying them, being able to get a rental property. I never got someone to a house yet, but I'm coming closer. But those little things, holidays, children getting better equipped to go to school, nicer clothes, all these little things can have a marked effect across a generation. Financial, but confidence, being leaders in your communities, all very small things that have a very large ripple effect, I suppose, for want of a better term. And those children seeing their family in business, then they can look at something. I didn't see anybody in business, I would have loved probably to go to university and study business, but no one knew about that. A lot of kids are in business now, accountants, those sorts of things. So it has a tremendous effect, and it also can help those people that have done it tough in life, made some bad decisions, and maybe get a job they wouldn't have got it in the wider community, and that helps them out. So there's many different benefits to those smaller organisations. You can tick a box and get a larger company to come in, and they may have some Aboriginal employees, but it doesn't give them much more than a starting job most places, right? So the ma and pa businesses can create generational wealth, buy that house and hopefully be able to be transfer that wealth one day. So very small things from people like yourselves can have a tremendous effect across a wide area, and matching businesses to utilise your services is a difficult thing, because probably you wouldn't know who's out there. I don't know, and I've been in this space for a long time. So yeah, those small things can have a marked effect.
Yeah, that's great, Colin. And I think that really provides the context of why we even have this webinar, or why we'd even run a program like this, because it would be very easy to just have a procurement policy, and for those who are in procurement to have to follow that, and say 20% of our procurement will be through indigenous enterprises or something like that. And that's what becomes the tick box exercise. But I guess why we've invited a range of people here who may be involved in various parts of the process, or you may not even be directly involved in the process, is that understands the difference that it makes. And I think, Colin, you touched on it beautifully, that kind of, you didn't even know anyone who owned a business. So by supporting these small enterprises and making it more possible for Indigenous people to own a business, you're not just supporting them and their enterprise, but the people around them and their community to understand that that's an option, that's something that they can do as well. I think it'd be really cool to talk as well, like I would love to flesh out that more than just a supplier, but actually investing in supporting small business. Colin, can you tell us a bit about, I guess, how we can support Indigenous enterprises more than just asking them to become a supplier? What does it look like to partner with these organizations and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, we've built our business around pro bono from individuals, but since I've been on board late last year, I've been more thinking about corporates. They all have the skill sets we require: IT, marketing, accounts, HR. All those are in one organisation. So if we can have some, interaction between a corporate and, say, my organisation, and then those skill sets can be put to the organisations, especially if we take on more social enterprises. That's a big one a lot of the corporates like to be involved in. And to give you a bit of a difference between the two, one of our smaller businesses takes between 20 to 50 hours work across a year. A social enterprise takes 100 to 200 hours. There's so many more moving parts and so much more knowledge they have to learn. So the more a corporate like yourselves, either have as a corporation come across and have access to the volunteers from those areas. Hopefully if it's a social enterprise, there may be some funds that they might be able to donate to them. I don't know, that's down the track, but there's always a skill set that will require from every corporate. I've never worked in the office, so I'm flying blind, right? So, so all those machines you have is what our people lack, whether that's a long-term proposition or small bursts, normally between 4 to 8 weeks to fix a problem. Counts. Sales and marketing, I did notice a few of them are in that space. How to grow the business, right? There's, and I work around. When they come to us, there has to be an increase in turnover. We pick a figure of 30%, otherwise it's not much point. I don't want them just coming to me having their nicer website, right? So that focus on using corporates to engage our businesses, that'll help in the interaction of some procurement transfer of money. They'll be familiar with the business, whatever area it is. That could make that a lot easier.
Thanks, Colin. And yeah, I think we touched on building the organizations up, and even Communityrs experienced that as a social enterprise. We've encountered potential clients who said, well, we need contractors who will be able to fulfill these requirements. And if you're not able to reach that, we can actually provide funding for you to invest in that area of your business to make sure that your security is to the right level where it needs to be, or to make sure that your turnover is able to, you're valid, your business model has been validated so that you can engage with us. So these are the kind of things that go beyond that specific contract. Or how do you actually support those organizations to reach that point where you can work with them? And that's really a partnership now. It's much more than just a supplier contract. Colin, can you, this wasn't in my questions, but are you able to tell us a bit more about what it looks like to mentor or work with one of your enterprises?
Oh, look, it's a little easy for me being an Aboriginal person, but look, some people are apprehensive about the cultural differences, right? So, but in the end, it's a business to business scenario. So it's a person to person. You have skills that they want to learn. If you're a nice enough person, generally most people can get on. So I try and allay those fears from our pro bono people first. I'm generally heavily involved in 1 or 2 meetings, right? But yeah, working with the person also, not the business. And I'm probably scaring a lot of people because there's a lot of moving parts here in this business. But we try and build their confidence. If they look like giving up, those sorts of things. If there's some trauma in their family life. People die at a phenomenal rate, so there's always lots of funerals, right? And some very close, and that happens in the wider space. It just happens a lot more with Aboriginal people. So we work with the person donating their time, and generally after a couple of days, you have a skill set that you're trying to teach someone and they're willing to learn. And that overcomes a lot of the cultural differences, and it comes to person interaction. And that's what I like to see best, because then it is just someone wanting to help someone and someone wanting to better their lives and learn from that person.
That's great, Colin. Later on in this session, we'll ask you all to think about how you could volunteer and what you would like to, what type of organizations you'd be interested in working with. But I think it'd be good to open to a time of Q&A. Does anyone have a question for Colin? Feel free to unmute. If we have a queue, you can put your hand up, but otherwise it's a pretty small group. So feel free to unmute and ask Colin a question. Any questions today?
Can I just ask a question? Whereabouts are most of these businesses located?
we're New South Wales wide, but predominantly it's Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong area. Right. And I probably will say that in this space, it's hard for corporates to interact with or engage these smaller businesses, right? You almost need an intermediary. And look, my organisation will be building a business around that, but I'm happy to help out in this early journey of yours to be that facilitator. It's been the biggest bugbear since all this began. There's a willingness from corporates and government, and there's businesses. They've missed how to interact for very, very long time. And I'm giving you some tidbits now, but there is a bit more to it. So I try and provide a bit more of a hands-on how to actually do it and get at least one or two done, and then you're generally off and running. But it is a hard space, so don't beat yourselves up too much about it if you haven't got all the answers yet and you make some mistakes. I've been doing this a long time, and the mistakes are generally the same, all right? And it's not through a lack of will or that, it's just a very interesting, different space. And it's big corporates dealing with very small corporates. There's some cultural differences there, but ultimately it's a big business dealing with a small business, and to interact is not an easy task because you're built around dealing with larger businesses as your own.
Colin, outside of your own experience, can you give us an example of an interaction that was successful and maybe why it was successful?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a couple from ours. A lady came to us before I was on board. She was struggling a little bit. She sells health bars with Aboriginal foods in them. She learned a bit more how to, and this is probably a story of corporates coming down a little bit and businesses going up. The price points, a few of her manufacturing things to provide larger contracts weren't quite there. That was all fixed up, but you got a large contract with Defence, Accor, I think is the big hotel chain, right? That took her from quite a small turnover. She's nudging close to $1 million now, right? So those little steps can provide it, and she's taken on a couple of staff of her family, right? So that's an interaction there. Yeah, so that's one. We've had some others in the education space, IT space, but they were a little more set up businesses too, a bit more. Lots of those people had very good government jobs, school teachers or whatever, so they were a little more set up. The extraordinary amount of work. I'll use our beef jerky lady. Sorry, kangaroo jerky. I've got to get that right. I keep making that mistake. She'll beat me up. All right. So Woolworths want her stock to go into Woolworths. She's going to take a tremendous amount of work to get that to that point of even fulfilling a smaller role, right? So they're little things, and the will's there. It's just the interactions and that, and we hope to provide that avenue where the businesses are built up to make it a little easier for people like yourselves to interact and say, well, you know, it might be buying stationery, something easy in you know, and we'll have a person who delivers stationery. You might say we want 10 million bucks worth of stationery, Colin. Go, well, hold on, you might have to wind that back a little bit, all right? And they can probably give you a few 100,000, little bits like that.
And so the lady who was successful with Accor, what sort of period of time was she involved with, you know, the person who was assisting her?
Well, she'd been with us for a long time. It probably takes 2 to 3 years to get to that.
Okay.
Right. So they're with us for a long time. The first year is generally fixing up the business to be able to go to those contracts, and negotiations with those larger companies can take a long time. All up, probably for her to kick a goal was probably closer to 18 months, maybe 2 years. And it's probably only been the third year where she's really started having the systems in place. So they're now comfortable with it. So it takes an extraordinary amount of time to find businesses, and you'll find this on your journey to fulfill those contracts, unless they're all already very large businesses.
And maybe Colin, within that, with I guess your programs, you might have had a mentor for 4 weeks in that period or 8 weeks of that period, addressing various parts, but they're partnered with Worthwhile Ventures as you support them for the 3 years, but they're kind of taking in support from different people in different avenues throughout that. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, and that particular lady, look, she had accountants come in, she had marketing people come in, all at different stages there, and there'd be skill sets amongst yourselves there that could provide those areas. Anything to help the business get to a stable point, and then utilise the skills to grow. So it all comes down to helping them in turnover. I don't like just being the same turnover at the end of the year, because that means I haven't really helped them. It says no good having a nicer website, no money in the bank. I'd rather you have a bad website and money in the bank. Okay. But the bad website is not what you're used to seeing. So we've got to balance it out somehow.
Thanks for those questions, Karen.
Can I ask a
Jackie?
couple of questions, Colin? 2 questions. So one would be, what comes first? Do you have a corporate come to you and say, look, we're thinking about a particular space in our business that we think could, we wonder if you have any contacts that might be able to help us and we help them? Or do we go to a website that says these businesses provide these services or products and then we contact them? How does that work?
Look, Supply Nation is the big website. I don't know if you have some procurement people there, right? You can go to that. Look, there's some deficiencies there, right? Unless there's a very set up business, right? But you can start an interaction most times from that. Will you find the right person? So generally how it normally goes, most people go to Supply Nation, they'll still struggle a little, they'll find someone like me that knows lots of businesses, and then I could probably say, what are you looking for? Right, we've got these businesses, how about you start with that interaction? I act almost as a broker, Jackie. So, and that's the missing piece of the puzzle. There has to be a broker between people like yourselves and the businesses. And having these chats, luckily I got to know communities. They put me in front of you. It's the broker that's missing, and that'll be the service that we'll be providing on a fee for service in a few months when we get a bit more set up. All right, so you can go on your own, all right, and some goals get ticked, but generally it still struggles a little, and they ask someone like me to be involved.
That's good. Okay, so in theory we could. So I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, but from the point of view of these people, the people on these calls, if this was the only webinar that they were able to attend, would they go onto your website or contact you to discuss further?
Yeah, look, you can I'd encourage you to go to Supply Nation. You can and jump on and get those contacts that might be easy to transfer. As it gets a little harder, look, contact me, right? Say, Cole, but try and have a defined amount of money in a contract or close to it, right? I get a lot of generalists. We're looking for Aboriginal businesses to be engaged with our business. Well, what does that mean? Right? It takes an extraordinary amount of time to say, look, I suppose, you're in the office, stationery is the one, right? We want to start doing X amount of dollars. We'll buy our percentage of stationery from this business, right? There's some people in the safety area. Again, I'll point to the safety vest person there, right? There's safety equipment. There's all little things, but try and narrow down a set contract amount from an area, right? That's the best thing you can do. And then to go and find the business. If you can't, you can call someone like me, all right? And I know that many. I could say, oh, look, ring Jimbo's safety wear down the road, or Auntie Mary's stationery store there, right? They'll sort you out, right? So yeah, it's getting a defined amount of money in a certain area so you can target. Don't just generalize, we want to spend more with Aboriginal businesses, because that generally doesn't go anywhere. Or you'll end up doing something like buying a painting and putting in your office, which is fine, but a bit more of an interaction is probably required.
Colin, just from a national perspective, have you got contacts in other states that you could refer us to as well, or is it all mainly New South Wales
Well,
based?
we're fairly New South Wales centric, right? It's probably, we're outside of that. Oh, look, I know a few, but I don't know everybody. We don't have our local corroboree across Australia all the time, as most people think. But I know some people, but look, something like if you're in other states, Supply Nation is your best starting point. It has its deficiencies in the interactions, right? And maybe you could ask a generalist question, look, Cole, we want to do this. How would we do it? All right, what's the best way to do it? So it's, and then you can. And if I could chase someone down, I'm happy to put that down on whatever area it is, right? So yeah, it's probably how you do it. I could help you rather than the specific businesses as I could in New South Wales.
I might add to that, Colin, that our webinar in 2 weeks' time is with social traders, and they do also try to identify and work with indigenous enterprises. So they're like with Colin, he partners specifically with individual organizations, whereas social traders is a network across Australia. So if you can attend that session, you'll be able to hear a bit more about their work, but otherwise you can reply to my emails, or I think enough my emails in the calendar invitation, but we can connect you with social traders who are similar to Supply Nation as well, and can help you get in touch with indigenous enterprises across the country. Any other questions at the moment? That's great. Well, thanks for those questions. It was really interesting to see, and really great that you're engaging with the content as well. So really appreciate that. And thank you, Colin, for sharing your experiences and yeah, what you've personally experienced, as well as the organizations that you've worked with. We really appreciate your time today. Colin's had a huge week with NAIDOC Week, so we really appreciate him giving up time today as well. Thanks, Colin.
I'm running on empty, but I will encourage you. It is a difficult space, ladies and gentlemen, right? So when you start in it, you'll have that strong will to help. It might not pan out straight away, and that's where people like myself could be that little conduit to help those couple of interactions, so that goodwill can transfer across to a meaningful partnership between yourselves and the Aboriginal businesses. But it is a difficult space, so don't stress if you're not kicking goals straight away.
Thanks, Colin. To wrap up, as we near the end of this session, I just want to go over some of the next steps and what it looks like to participate in this program. So we appreciate you turning up today, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks' time, same time slot. We'll be looking at social procurement essentials with social traders. Look, we would also love for you to get involved with an organization and do some volunteering to put, I guess, what you're learning into practice as well, and help use the inspiration. I always feel inspired after hearing Colin's stories and the stories of working with those organizations. So I hope you're currently thinking about, oh, this is great information, what can I actually do? So one of those ways that Community looks to facilitate those conversations is to actually connect you with organizations like that. So I've just sent a Google form in the chat. Please let me know if that works. We'd love to just give you 2 minutes to fill that out. Essentially, just ask you a bit about what it might look like for you to volunteer and how you want to engage. So again, one of it's volunteering. We don't want you to be voluntold to do something. So what we hope is that we can find a way to engage with you and connect you to an organization that suits your skills and your interests at the moment. Long term, we would love for you to take on what Colin has mentioned and look at how you can support indigenous enterprises, and I guess in 2 weeks' time, more broadly speaking, with social enterprises. Excellent, thanks, Katie. So I'll give you 2 minutes to fill that out. Essentially, if you're able to participate, then we'll look at matching you with volunteering opportunities over the next week. So we'll use the information that you put into that form today to work with Colin and some of his contacts, as well as some social enterprises and organizations that we work with. So we'll be working with them next week. We really think like it's not just, I guess, the reason we're not just posting Seek Volunteer link and telling you to find something is that we really do want to support you to actually get to know an organization that's suitable. So we'll be working with these organizations next week so that by the time we meet for our next webinar, our hope is that everyone who's able to is aware of an organization that they can work with, and the week after that program, you could actually start volunteering with that social enterprise. We have, so there's 2 webinars, but we want to come together on August 11th to do some recognition and reflection to hear how those experiences have gone. So that's, I guess that's the picture for the next month. We really appreciate your time this morning. I'll give you a bit of time to fill out the Google form and then we can wrap it up.
Sorry, can I just jump in there a minute, Will? I just want everybody to kind of, this is probably fairly obvious, but the very fact that we're using Communitea, who's a social enterprise, is to understand that what their main focus, their priority is to improve and increase volunteering and skilled volunteering, you know, in our communities. So the service they provide in order to do that are these kind of educational or these projects, so that it just gives you some background. So that, you know, and that's what Colin was talking about as well, is that yes, these social enterprises or these small businesses are offering a product or service, but the priority is behind that. The priority is that they're trying to get people who can't get employed back into employment, or they're trying to provide some wealth for their communities, or whatever that might be. And that's where you kind of turn the partnership on its head, that you understand that the service or the product is the means to the actual end of what they're really trying to do. So that's just to give you a background of why there's an emphasis on the volunteering part of this, because that's the ultimate aim of this, of Communitea's social enterprise. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. I should add that yeah, if you're interested in indigenous enterprises in particular, we can work with Colin on that. But all of the social enterprises that we engage with, it's we take it on a case-by-case level. So we partner with organizations that we really think are doing great things. There's only kind of, I think, social traders, the reason we partner with them is because they do kind of certify that organizations are a social enterprise. But at the moment, I think if you donate 1% of your profit, you could say you're a social enterprise. But the organizations you'll be working with are organizations that we really think are contributing greatly to their community, or their business model is centered around giving back to their local community, or taking on sustainable practices or things like that. So these are the kind of organizations that we're hoping to support as part of this program. And like I said, we really appreciate your time in these sessions to learn more. And we really are looking forward to working with you over the next month and seeing how those relationships go. But thanks so much for joining us today. I might pause the recording there. For those who are watching it online, they can grab the form. I'll send that link to Jackie as well, so she can pass it around if needed.